Let me share. Okay, so thanks for joining today, Reeve. So yeah, welcome to the stream. I do this like a couple of times a week. This more recently, so really great to have. And I've been kind of running this all focused on stablecoins, kind of the hot topic we are in right now. So yeah, and so tell me, let's start by talking about your story because that's why we are here. So how did you get started? How did you, what's your journey? Are you a cryptographer? And how you got involved with the whole stablecoin meta?
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show. Well, it's a long story in the sense that I've seen a lot of technology revolutions. I was fortunate enough to graduate college in 1997. So really just at the start of the internet era. So right when the internet was really breaking onto the scene and getting global adoption. And I got a job at the first ever online advertising agency. It's called Avenue A in Seattle, turned into Razorfish.
Mhm.
And so to be able to be like one of the first people to like put ads online and really see what the adoption of a new technology looked like, it was an extraordinary experience to get a front row seat to the rise of the internet bubble and just see all these companies pop up around the world that were based on this new technology. And at the time, that technology was the global instant and free movement of information. And so
Mhm.
it really was an amazing education and experience. And I got to see how new business models were created and how you can utilize this new technology to put forth new ideas. And so that company did extraordinarily well in the bubble. It went public in the peak at 99, and for $6.6 billion. We started, and 2 years later, it just really exploded. So to witness that firsthand was quite an experience. And then I started a handful of other businesses, mainly focused on the internet. But I had a friend, Brock Pierce, actually, that who's been a very prolific person in the crypto space, who introduced me to Bitcoin in 2013. And
Mhm.
so for that decade, I started a number of companies, but really in the internet space. And then the new concept came, and when I really grasped what Bitcoin was, which back then in 2013, there was a very small group of people that ever even heard of it. But just like the internet, it's the global instant and free movement of information. Bitcoin was the global instant and free movement of money. And that made a ton of sense. The challenge was the money at the time was Bitcoin. The only thing that was moving on that blockchain was Bitcoin, this highly volatile, very strange type of foreign currency that was based on code. It wasn't really based on anything that people could get their hands around. So just for people to get comfortable with that concept was difficult enough. And that's when the idea kind of popped up. There was like, okay, you have this new way to move money, but the only kind of money you're moving is Bitcoin. How about we format dollars, euros, yen, real world currencies, format it to work on the blockchain? So that really was the concept and the inception of the idea of the stablecoin. And so we kind of put that together at tail end of 2013, and that was the formation of Tether. Um, and at the time, it was such a novel idea, but then again, blockchain and Bitcoin and everything else was, nothing had been tokenized. We really had to modify. There was a program at the time called Mastercoin that turned into Omni. It was a protocol on top of Bitcoin.
Right.
And we had to modify that enough just so we could actually tokenize something. So really at the time it was very cutting edge stuff. And obviously now all that's extremely commoditized and basic.
Right.
But yeah, we really had to modify that to be able to tokenize something, and we tokenized the dollar.
So this is a
And
really
when we
interesting page from internet history, right? So your background is you're an engineer or a or an
no
advertiser. You're an internet entrepreneur, but what's your trade craft?
Yeah, I graduated college in finance, but really just
Right.
more
Okay.
just business, right? So an
You're right.
entrepreneur,
Right.
just
Okay.
really understanding how to roll out new businesses, but definitely not an engineer.
Okay.
No, yeah.
Right. So and then 2014, you worked with Brock Pierce, and at that time, I think a lot of people were doing colored coins.
Yeah, so there was
Yeah.
there
Sorry,
was
go ahead,
colored
please.
coins. And back then that was a debate, and so we had Craig Sellers joined as well, and Craig Sellers was the CTO of Mastercoin. So really we were debating on should we use the colored coins protocol or Mastercoin to be able to tokenize things to the blockchain and or write messages. At the time it wasn't even tokenization, write
That's
messages
right.
to the blockchain. Yeah, and since Craig was there, we went with Mastercoin, and that really was the inception. That's the foundation of Tether. And when we tried to tell people that idea, no one got it. It
Was
made
was
no
was Vitalik
sense.
involved in this too? Like, I think people joke about Masternode and Mastercoin and sometimes use his name. Was he involved?
If I'm not mistaken, this is a long time ago. I think he might have been involved in colored coins, but I'm not sure because I know that Dino and Amir and a couple other guys really were pushing colored coins at the time, and they were all involved
Yeah,
in Ethereum. So
right,
if he was involved, it would have been on the colored coin side, but I don't think he
right, right,
was on
right,
the
right.
Mastercoin side.
Okay, okay, okay. And Mastercoin was originally not conceived as a stable coin, right?
No,
what
no,
was
no.
the core idea behind Mastercoin?
Mastercoin was a concept to write messages to the Bitcoin blockchain. So to
Ah,
allow you to, yeah. So in the op return, you could write some characters, and it just allowed you to embed data in blocks. Was one of the first protocols to do that. I think J.R. Willett was
and
the
why
founder of
why
it.
did we want to write those messages? What was the idea before? What were you planning to do with the messages? What use cases did you have in mind?
No, I was not part of Mastercoin. That was Craig. And so when we were looking at technology, that message basically allowed you to tokenize the dollar. So basically it allowed us to create tokens on the Bitcoin blockchain. And there was Tether, which is the most successful one, and I believe Filecoin, if I'm recalling correctly, was also one of the tokens that was somewhat successful on top of Mastercoin back then.
I see. So the idea is to write arbitrary messages on top of the Bitcoin blockchain, use it as a messaging protocol, and that leads to the idea that okay, maybe similar to Swift or something, you can essentially use these messages to send anything, right? You can use these messages to send dollars
Yeah, well, to simplify it, to create a token.
to
So
create a
really,
token. And what do we
yeah.
mean by token at that time? Because now it means a lot of different things. But when you say token, what's the idea behind a token?
Well, we created Tether. So it was a separate token that you could have in your wallet. And if you wanted to send that
Right.
token to someone,
I
it would
see.
utilize the blockchain
Right. Right.
as the rail. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. And what was the need? As in, where did the idea come from? As in, was it because exchanges were not allowed to use fiat rails, or because obviously Satoshi wanted to create something that's quite different, right? As in, Bitcoin purists would say that Bitcoin isn't meant to be used this way. Bitcoin is supposed to be this, better money, and now we are bringing dollar on the blockchain. So where was the need, the demand coming from? What led to the creation of the idea? Is it because exchanges were not able to use fiat on ramps, or
Yeah.
what was it?
Well, Satoshi created two things. You're 100% right. He created better money. Bitcoin is better money for a number of reasons that hopefully everyone on here understands. But in addition to creating better money, he created a better way to move that money, and that was the
Mhm.
blockchain. And since we had a
Right,
better way to move money, we're like, well, let's move more than just Bitcoin. Let's bring dollars, euros, yen onto the blockchain.
right, right,
Because
right,
look,
right. And
yeah, when you think about the traditional rails, right, it's slow and expensive and very much confined within borders. And then you look at the blockchain, and it's none of those things. And so it's not just a marginally better way to move money; it's 10x or 100x better way to move money. And what's interesting is it's taken 10 plus years for the world to figure that out, because only now in 2000 and uh, sorry, only now are we able to is are stable coins really the narrative? And they've been around for 10 plus years, right? Like
yeah,
it's crazy.
yeah, and they've been very successful. So I think Tether was a bit of a runaway success. How did it go in the early days? Was Tether like, did you guys have to struggle and explain to people what you're trying to do, or was it like, okay, wait, was Bitfinex around in those days?
Yeah, so you kind of asked like what the real use case was and where it
Yeah.
was driven from. So The concept was to move money, but really the people that wanted to move money on a blockchain were the exchanges. And Bitfinex kind of said, oh, hey, and we partnered with them very early on, and then they ended up acquiring the company. Well, not Bitfinex per se, but the principals. But they were one of the largest Bitcoin exchanges at the time, and they had the
Yeah.
biggest need. So in the very
Yeah, I have
beginning, it was
used
to,
Bitcoin once upon a time. Sorry.
yeah,
I was a Bitfinex user, and I think there was a lot of concerns and worries around Bitfinex also because you guys were, I think, very entrepreneurial and the tech was also maturing. But it was still probably the biggest exchange at the time, 2014,
yeah,
15. Finance
absolutely.
hadn't been created then. That's
No.
right. Okay.
Yeah, and so they wanted to move money amongst exchanges and settle their order books, and then traders started seeing it. Yeah, because back then banking was extremely difficult. It was very hard to
Yeah.
get banking.
Yes, it
Yeah,
was
and
all
so they're
drug
like,
dealer money back then. I mean, I was at PwC, and when I started talking about Bitcoin and blockchain to bankers, they told me, "Hey, this is all drug dealer stuff. What are you doing here?" So, anyways, and I think Silk
yeah,
Road was all the rage, and people were talking about Ross Ulbricht and Ulbricht and all of those things. So it wasn't particularly easy to talk to banks.
no,
And then Bitfinex comes around, and there is okay. So this is inter-exchange settlement, not so much consumer use for depositing money into exchanges, but so that exchanges have a more reliable way to settle
yeah.
inter-exchange balance.
Right. The idea was to for consumers to move money globally, and we were going to solve remittances and all those things. But the
I
first
see.
use case, right? The
Use
first
case.
use case was like, oh, well, we really needed to settle our order books and just move money on chain. And
Yeah.
then they listed it, and so then traders are like, oh, great, I can still instead of trading Bitcoin and utilizing the five other tokens back at the time, like Litecoin and Dogecoin, if they wanted to get in and out, they could trade it against the dollar, right? They needed a dollar-based trading pair. And so
Right.
they could leave their money on chain instead of having to move it to a bank account and then move it back, especially if you wanted to
Right.
move it from one exchange to another and you wanted to sit out of the volatility. And then after the
Right.
traders used it, they're like, this is amazing, right? So all these traders were using Tether, this dollar-based token, and they could move it around. So then they started sending it to their friends and to other people. They're like, oh, if you need some money, well, I can just send it this way super easily, right? Like send it like a text message. I can send it just like a Bitcoin instead of having to wire you money. And then slowly
Mhm.
payments caught on and more people were using it. And then the use case kind of evolved to people in foreign countries. Like, you know, when you live in the US, you have the number one currency in the world. The dollar is the strongest. When you stack rank
Yeah.
the 180 plus currencies, everyone wants to trade up, but no one had
Mhm.
access. So now other countries like, oh, great, I would love to swap into my dollars. So then they get a wallet and they figure out crypto because that's the demand. They had a demand for dollars. And so then
Right.
just more and more use cases came, but it took a really long time. No one understood it for years. Tether didn't really take off till 2017. We started it in really the end of 2014, launched in 2013, launched it in 2014, and it didn't really take off until the ICO boom, and that's
Okay. What
when
changed?
real
So
time.
what changed? What changed? As in, I think it'll be amazing. I'm really enjoying this conversation. So please tell us some stories of the struggle. Why was it hard in the beginning? What sort of answers were you getting from people you were pitching Tether to, and what were their biggest concerns?
You can't do it. It's impossible. First of all, no one would ever want it. This is a terrible idea. I don't even understand what you're talking about. And why would you want to do this? Two, if you do it, you're breaking not only all the laws of money exchange, but the laws
Yeah.
of
What?
every single state, right?
That's
Like
right.
everything. They're like, there's no way you can possibly do this. And so that was just my attorneys, let alone the people I was trying to talk to, and we couldn't, like, no one wanted to invest in it. Like it
They
just
were
didn't
not
make
wrong.
sense
They
to
were
me.
not wrong. There was a legitimate concern that if the U.S. government in those days sees the dollar moving around without KYC on a blockchain, then they would not particularly like it. There's BSA, I think at that time I remember HSBC, and all of these other banks were going through multiple KYC and AML remediations to fix their internal, anti-money laundering controls and whatnot. So it was hard enough for banks, and now you start moving a US dollar around on the blockchain. that takes some balls. Let's put it that way, right? And that's very brave. And I think Mark Andreessen tried to do it in 95, and they had to shut it down because they wanted to make a dollar token part of the Netscape browser, and they shut it down because no one would invest in it. So you start it all over again, and well, that's brave. So how did you guys convince yourself to do it? I mean, is it just Brock being Brock, or and complete
No,
degen,
it
or what
was
is it?
like I was also had some businesses in the online poker
Yeah,
space. So there back
yeah.
then, online poker was
That's another
extremely
one of those.
popular. Right, it
Right,
was a gray area.
right.
So I had
Yeah,
I
yeah,
watched a lot of my friends navigate through that, and some got in a lot of
right.
trouble, but then they also navigated out of it. And so it gave me some
Yeah,
awareness to what the level of how to
boundaries
navigate
are
in
and how
that
to
world.
navigate this. Okay, and how did you navigate it? Tell us what you can, because
You know,
right.
you get a lot of advice from a lot of different attorneys, and then but you really have to kind of trust your gut and go with your gut and not listen to some and take the advice of others and just kind of formulate your own strategy and make your own
Right,
path.
right,
And
right.
yeah. And but look, like also since we're a startup and such a small company and no one, it's going to take a long time
Yeah,
to get on anyone's radar
right,
because look
right.
at 2016 you got Libre that tried to roll out. Facebook tried to do it. And the moment they made this announcement, I'm like 0% chance. This is dead like the day after they make the announcement. And they spent lots of money and realized they weren't ever going to get away with it.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's a critical point you made here, which is that when you're a startup, right, you can take risks, and that's kind of your opportunity, and you have to take risks to compete with to compete with the big players, and that's kind of a consistent story, right? So Tether, you guys went through that more than once. Then Ethereum, right? Back in the day, I think Ethereum was seen as a security. It probably was a security, and if the Ethereum co-founders hadn't gone through with it and taken the chances, then the DAO hack happened. I think it just went through a lot of these existential crises and experiences, and then Binance comes around, and CZ is also taking a bunch of those risks. So there is a consistent pattern here that when you're a startup, you get to take risks. It's both a privilege and a curse, but you almost have to do it, right? As in, if you don't take some of those risks, then you never get to be as big. Now Tether is what, they just announced a $20 billion raise at $500 billion valuation, will end up being one of the biggest banks or similar by market cap. So if you never get there, if you don't take some you know risks that large firms cannot take. So a lot of people I talk to are founders. So this is a really good story. And fine. So 2017 ICOs come around. What happens then?
Yeah, I mean, that's really when things started really heating up in the blockchain space because now there was use cases. So Ethereum was announced in, I don't even remember, 2015. Maybe they announced in 2014 and they launched it in
2014, and
2016.
then 2015 was the DevCon one. Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
they launched it, 2016, and the beginning of 2017 is when the first use case came around. Like before then it was just trading Bitcoin and holding on to it, but then, the advent of the ICOs, because now you had this new blockchain Ethereum that allowed you to create a token
Uh,
and really, right? So now you can create this token, but what are you going to do with the token? You're going to do what the whole world loves to do, gamble, right? So the ICOs,
Someone had to say it out loud. Yeah, I
yeah.
agree with you. That's, yeah, absolutely. Look at the perp dexes today. Yeah, okay, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah,
They're all just
right.
different ways to gamble. And they're exciting. And for once, the whole world had access to this really cool casino. So people are like, great, I'm going to do an ICO. I'm going to launch this token, put some money in, and get everyone in there. And it's so interesting to see how that's evolved over time, how the gambling's evolved over time. And a lot of the reason it's evolved is because of regulation saying, well, okay, this ICO it's not a security, so it's a utility token. And then they tried to game that, and people tried to build businesses, but it moved, and then those businesses would fail, but they would make all the money, and so it really was a gamble. And then that evolved all the way to meme coins, which people are actually like, I don't want to be a security, I don't want to be a utility, I don't want anything, but we still want to gamble. They don't call it that. They're like, let's create a community token, let's create a sentiment coin. And so they put out a meme coin, but obviously it's gambling because there's nothing behind it. There's no point, and it's so interesting to see
Yeah,
a lot of those
yeah.
meme
Vitalik
coins.
is still uncomfortable with the idea. he wrote a blog, I think this week, saying, I mean, he wrote a blog about low risk DeFi and how low risk DeFi is Ethereum's use case, and I was like, there's no such thing, right? I think right now people mostly come to DeFi for leverage. I mean, there is payments, sure, but and there's some relative safety in some protocols, but mainly people are coming to lever up and gamble. So what do you exactly mean by low risk DeFi? And yeah, and meanwhile people are trading 40x, 70x leverage. Perhaps that's a really good point. So then Tether takes off. This is around the same time that Binance is launching, right?
Yeah, yeah. But back, so that's 2017. And then also I started another company. I actually did participate. I did create an ICO as well because it was also an amazing way to bring new technology to market. So for me, in my vision, it's always been to deliver on the promise of blockchain. And then that's also evolved to include to deliver on the promise of Web3. So the promise of blockchain is kind of global financial inclusion, provide world-class financial services to anyone that has a cell phone. So it's both the banking infrastructure and the currency. So Tether democratized access to the dollar around the world. And then the promise of Web3 is now that the network, the community, can reap the rewards from participating. So the people that put the value into the network get the value out of the network. And so in about 2016, I started a company called Block V, and we did an ICO in 2017. And it was the first, we created the NFT. We were the first people to really make an NFT platform. And this was before the term NFT. We called it a VATM at the time because you had to come up with a term with a collectible, like a non-fungible token, but they weren't calling them non-fungible tokens. So we called it a virtual atom, the building block of your virtual life. But NFTs exploded on the scene for another specific reason. So ICOs were still people kind of in the financial world that were really into cryptocurrencies and into financial into investing. Then NFTs came and it opened up the audience to collectors, to just random people, to artists, to everyone that wanted to do things for a hobby, and it allowed them to gamble. And so NFTs got a bad rap because people were gambling on images. However, there's a ton of utility in NFTs. NFTs are going to be the building blocks of our digital lives, and they are part of Web3 because now that you have a wallet, and now that if you're a community and you are participating in a network doing something, the way you get rewarded is through tokens in that wallet. It can be currencies, but it also can be NFTs that represent different things that you're different types of rewards, etc. And all of your tickets and ID, everything's going to be an NFT. And now we're starting to see NFTs really in the financial world. Now that a lot of RWAs are coming on chain, that will open up a whole new type of financial based NFT where it's a specific duration of yield, a specific amount of yield tied to a specific dollar amount of investment. So anyways, these are the building blocks of kind of the development that has taken place in crypto in order to get us to where we are today, which is really we're finally getting to a place. I know I'm skipping ahead in the story here, but we're finally getting to a place where real applications are taking place, where real applications are happening, kind of the application layer of the blockchain. So it's not just about the rails and the layer ones and which layer one are you going to, which blockchain are you going to use to move your token? It's like, why do you want to move that token? What am I trying to accomplish? Yeah.
Yeah. So which NFTs did you launch early on? What NFTs can we associate you with? The CryptoPunks or something else?
It's before that, actually.
It's before that, right.
We created the technology. We created a technology platform to create highly programmable digital goods. So these are highly programmable NFTs, and the company was called Block V, and it's an extremely robust NFT platform and Web3 wallet. And then on top of that, I created a company called Smart Media Technology, and we've taken that platform and really enhanced it. And it's amazing. Visa has white labeled our technology solution. So Visa uses our Web3 wallet and sells it as a Visa solution that, for
What is
loyalty and
it called?
reward points
What
for
do the
banks.
Visa guys call it?
The Visa Web3
Okay.
wallet.
Right,
Yeah,
the Visa,
is a
of
loyalty and
course.
rewards program. And
Right.
and like we did
I know it
activations
used to
for
be
the
a really big
Olympics.
back in when Don Tapscott wrote his book around the ICO era, and I come from a very different background, so I've been always a bit of a boomer, and very very close to regulation, compliance, risks, so in banks and whatnot, and my risk appetite is quite the opposite of yours. I think it's changed a lot, but in those days I was looking at Tether, and we were going around with Tether FUD saying, "Hey, is this really backed by the collateral these guys are claiming to be?" I think the Tether FUD still comes back once in a while, right? And I think there were a lot of questions about Tether, who is actually auditing this thing. I don't see a big four auditor because I come from I was at PwC at the time, and there was a lot of discussion around. There were, I think, some NYDFS went after Tether at some point. And obviously ICOs were very unpopular with Jay Clayton, and then subsequently with Mr. Gensler. I think yeah. So you kind of been on the bleeding edge of the internet, and it's the bleeding edge of the internet has always been a little bit unpopular with the current system and its regulators, and it's even outside of crypto. When I look back, I think it's whether it's credit cards, e-commerce, internet gaming, everything, porn, of course. There is almost everything that people actually want on the internet or actively use apart from work seems to be relatively unpopular, right? Apart from now, e-commerce has got regulated. Now Tether is, I think Plasma just launched today. It's what I'm looking at it, 10.2 billion FDV. So now it's a very different story. But you kind of been, I think, on the leading edge of the internet, and navigated it quite well. So, well, congratulations for doing that, and thank you as well. I think a lot of things now Stripe is launching a stablecoin blockchain, and Circle just had an IPO. Now every payments company wants to do a stablecoin. So the things that used to be really uncool and I think scary back in the day when you were doing them are now suddenly mainstream, and well, not so much suddenly, right? It looks like suddenly, but I think it's an extraordinary amount of work
Yeah.
has gone into it, and some serious risk
Yeah, 10
taking as
plus
well.
years.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and some serious risk taking, not just financial, but also I think dealing with the powers that be, and in a time, and because President Trump wasn't always there, right? I mean, even until like a year and a half ago, everyone was worrying about debanking, and you couldn't talk to banks again about all of this. All the banks that had announced all these custody projects, and Goldman Sachs, Standard Chartered, Citibank, they were all kind of shutting down those programs. Now everyone is obviously back on the bandwagon, but you've been kind of a pioneer, and from day one pushed the edge. So thank you for
Yeah.
doing that, first of all, and you've been proven right. So I mean, back in I've been very close to Ethereum. I worked on enterprise Ethereum, for consensus. Worked on all the traditional finance. I'm one of them. So, but I think a lot of the things you guys managed to pull off would have surprised me.
But
So,
we
so,
won
so
you over finally,
you won. You
you
won. No. You just didn't win me over. You won. That's it. That's it. So okay. So NFTs. What happens after that? What's your? Where do you go from there?
Well, and I do want to touch on something you said. You said, well, Donald Trump wasn't always in office. And so we can't stress the importance of what when the government takes such a huge shift towards being
Yeah.
pro crypto versus as anti as possible, now as pro as possible, right? A
And
massive
this is a
shift.
different Donald Trump, by the way. In his last 4 years, in
Yeah.
his first 4 years, it's not the same Donald Trump. So, now I think he's finally figured out and I think we can give Polygon some credit for getting him into NFTs and so on and so forth. So now it's, yeah, so now huge opportunity. Also a little bit unnerving as to whether we are, now again causing a bubble. But where do you go from NFTs? What did you do
But
next?
the piece on Trump I wanted to say, because right now you're saying that
Right.
stable coins are the narrative, and that's the big thing, and it's because of the regulatory landscape, right? So
Yeah.
because the reason why stable coins are so huge is all the banks want to do them, because one, they're lucrative, and not only are they lucrative, it's just a better way to move money. But before they couldn't touch it, but now they can touch it. That's why it's the narrative
Yeah.
now. This
Yeah.
stable coins would have been the narrative 10 years ago. but the only thing that held it up was the big banks would never get in the space, and now they are.
Now they are.
So
Now they are.
yeah, yeah,
Now they can't
but yeah.
wait, and now they want to make laws that would stop other people. Fortunately, Tether is too big now to stop, and Circular is legit in terms of they've done an IPO and whatnot. So now banks can't stop us, right? And but they want to, at least they want to control yield-bearing stable coins and whatnot in the United States, and the banker lobby is still very strong. So that's a really key point, right? And but this is a huge opportunity. I don't know how it's going to be after 3 years if the politics takes a different turn, and God forbid Elizabeth Warren comes back and she still has the same policy mindset, and we haven't made the laws that we need to make in the next 3 years. So where do you go from there? Now you've done Block V. It again takes off. It's loyalty points are really huge. Don Tapscott is talking about it. There are a few other ICOs and at that time that are trying to do that. IBM is talking about it. Consensus is doing a project on it, at least one project. What happens next?
Yeah, so been deep in the space there, really trying to promote NFTs and then really to Web3. And so that's and seeing that where the market went, so the NFT rise and then DeFi kind of hit 2020.
That's right. Yeah.
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 And and what's DeFi? A whole new way to gamble, right? Especially in the
Yeah.
beginning.
Hey, you're not
Um,
supposed to say that. My previous boss, Danny Kulachov, I will be very upset. So, and Vitalik obviously doesn't want to hear it either.
yeah.
So yeah. So DeFi, what is DeFi?
Well, the
It's
reason
one
why
way
I
to
say
gamble,
that,
but yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, I don't want to say that it's negative because it attracts tons and tons of people, and that's what people jump into, and then it gets refined, and the real use cases start coming from it. And DeFi
Ah,
is
ah,
extraordinary, but you got to get
ah,
awareness, right? And awareness is, oh,
ah.
let's do this. Everyone's making money.
Right,
Um,
right, right. I
but
know,
but
I
DeFi,
get it now. So everything starts with this hook, and the hook is, oh, well, there's a shitload of money to be made in this
yeah,
casino. Then we start to build bring the mainstream on, and it's like gambling and porn, right? So obviously we're not doing porn. The spank chain comes around as well, but that doesn't take off. But we're doing gambling, and the first use case is yield farming, 2,000% APYs, and all these teaser APIs. You're absolutely right. And then these airdrops come through. I think Leshner launches what is it? Yield farming, and Synthetics does yield farming, and right, everyone else follows. And okay, and then you start building entire protocols like Earn Finance. Right. Please go ahead. Sorry, I don't want. I get
but
too excited. Yeah.
absolutely, because really innovative financial products have come out of DeFi, like Aave and Curve and all these things. They're incredible, right? When you go back a few years, and the concept of instant loans was groundbreaking. Like, what do you mean? I could just post collateral and get a
Yeah.
loan, right?
Yeah,
Like
so
when you
so I
think
have
about,
another. Sorry, I know this is your story, but when I met Stani in 20, what is it, 17, 18, and I looked at Eatland, and I told him this is never going to take off. I ended up asking him for a job later, but that's a different story. So, right, right. Okay, and are you involved with DeFi at this stage?
no, I mean, other than just an active participant in it, but I didn't create any
Right,
products in that space. It took me a little while to dive into DeFi, because also it's very complex, and in the beginning it's just if you're a trader or gambler really trying to dive in there. But like the yield farming was amazing for a lot of people, but then there's
yeah,
also a lot of risk around that. But
yeah,
that's
of
all
course,
evolved, and there's so many great tools in place today, and so many
yeah,
great applications from DeFi. It's changed the world, and we're getting to a
yeah,
point where you know CeFi and DeFi are really being blended, and soon
yeah,
in a few years, and seeing all these apps come out now that are blending the two. You have cash and you have crypto. It's all in one app, and you can move it all
yeah.
seamlessly,
Yeah,
and so that's
yeah.
all coming. And
And
yeah, it's
MakerDAO was announced in 2017 at the DevCon as the first lending protocol, as I think they were trying to build an on-chain decentralized stablecoin. Stani gives stablecoins a lot of credit, right? So he says DeFi would never have taken off without stablecoins. You wouldn't know what to do, right? So sure, you can post collateral, but now what?
yeah. Stable coins, it's laid the foundation. Like Tether is the foundation of blockchain. And
Right.
it's evolving now that there's more and more, and soon to be hundreds more of stable coins, but it has been the foundation for so long because it was the first by many years. Um, And now that's evolving. Like my latest project, which I am most excited about, stable. So
That's
creating
right.
the stable coin so many years ago, seeing that vision of moving dollars on the blockchain, but how do we evolve that? What's next? Well, at the moment we get to lean into a lot of the narratives. One, the popularity of stable coins because they're so useful, but just as importantly is this movement of RWAs. So DeFi then is kind of led to the tokenization of real world assets, which isn't
Yeah.
new. In 2018, we tried to do it. They were just called security tokens. However,
Yeah.
there was too many issues with the administration, right? Especially in the US, they would never really allow it, but now that's
So
changed.
I think what you said earlier is very interesting and very insightful, because I was doing tokenization on enterprise blockchains at the time, but there was no casino, right? It was a little bit boring, and we could never show the bankers a way to make money, right? It was all about tokenization for operational efficiency, tokenization for back office settlement, tokenization to improve and streamline middle office. But then the front office guys, the guys who actually sign the checks for these projects would be like, okay, but where is the money? Okay, you will save me money in 10 years. I don't want to know. Show me the money
Yeah.
now, right? So, and without tokens, there's no money to be shown. So, okay, right. So stable. Why do we need stable? What's the big idea?
The evolution of the stablecoin. So
Right.
Galaxy just came out with a really insightful report on-chain DeFi yield and stablecoins and where all the yield comes from. And
Yeah.
in looking at that detailed report, what we've created with stable truly is an entirely new category. And why is that? Stablecoin 1.0, just a simple payment token, Tether, USDC, right? Give them $1. Tether buys a treasury. Tether earns the interest, uses the principal to back that token. What do you get? You get the utility. You get to use a token, freely trading token on chain. Tether gets all the interest. However, fast forward to today, and all of these RWAs, high quality traditional assets, are being tokenized and brought on chain. So now
Mhm.
treasuries, money market funds, and soon many, many other types of traditional assets are coming on chain. It's the same asset. It just gets more utility when it's tokenized and comes on chain. However, let's say that you have a tokenized treasury now. What do you do with it on chain? You still sit on it. It's just a treasury on chain. It sits in your wallet, whereas it sat in your bank account before or in a custodian's account before. Um, what stable does is it utilizes these RWAs and the stablecoin narrative and the promise of Web3, meaning give to the network puts the value in, give the value back to them. So it's the evolution of the stablecoin. Because when Tether bought a traditional treasury, now that treasuries are on chain, we allow the minters, we allow the network and the community to buy that treasury and post it as collateral. So it is a protocol where you take an RWA, a yield-bearing treasury, post it as collateral, and we solve a bunch of problems because we split it into two tokens. We strip the yield from it, and that becomes a financial NFT called YLD. So you have this NFT that's a tokenized income stream, the yield from that treasury, and you keep that. That is a security token. However, the principal, just like Tether used the principal to back USDT, the principal now backs USST, our universal stablecoin. So from a really high level, you become the minter. You're the one that gets to reap all the rewards from minting the token. You're the one that keeps the interest. It's not a yield-bearing stablecoin, but if you put $10,000 in this system, so you buy the treasury, you post it as collateral, we strip the yield, you keep that, and then you spend the stablecoin. The
Right, right,
moment you
right. So,
spend it,
mhm.
just the last thing I want to say is the moment you spend it, you've now gotten that yield for free. You just sold the USST, so you got the $10,000 back. So you can do it
I
again
see.
and again.
So there are a couple of key ideas here, right? So one is that your collateral is essentially high quality liquid assets. It's not just US dollar anymore. The second thing is you're stripping the yield and the principal. So that's the second thing. And the third thing, obviously, it has its own decentralized governance. And okay, so it's an evolution in the sense that now you can have a broader set of collateral, RWA tokenized RWA collateral to issue this type of stable coin. That's pretty cool, but because that obviously you have to kind of manage the collateral very closely, right, and look at the collateral quality very closely, because RWAs have their own challenges in terms of what you are backing, what you're borrowing against, essentially, in this case.
Yep. So 2 points on that. It's a short curated list of collateral that will allow us backing, starting with, for instance, Franklin Templeton's Benji fund. So the big companies are tokenizing treasuries, Ondo, Janus funds with Centrifuge, Franklin Templeton, Superstate, lots of companies. There's lots of companies that are quality custodians, and they're tokenizing the treasuries and putting them on chain. And so we as Stable just partner with them, or just allow those different assets to be utilized as collateral. So yes, they have to be quality tokenized assets that come on chain. And then the second piece that's really important there is think about the reserves, and how difficult it is for traditional stablecoin companies to audit their reserves and be transparent and post their reserves at all times on chain. If it's all held in bank accounts around the world, it's very difficult to do. So with Stable, it's always on chain, real time verifiable, because the only collateral is already tokenized treasuries. And so it's very easy to publish everything's on chain. All of our reserves are on chain at all times. So it's really easy to see that the reserves match the USST in circulation.
Got it. And who are the people who kind of benefit most from this type of stablecoin structure? Where do you see the demand coming from?
Everybody. This is why it's the
Okay.
evolution of stablecoins, and this is why it's the
Right.
future of stablecoins, because once people get it, just like when I tried to explain Tether in the beginning, no one understood it. They're
Yeah.
like, this makes no sense. Now, when you look back at it, the whole world's like, that's a no-brainer. Anyone could
Yeah.
have
I
thought of
mean,
that. I'm like,
right.
really?
No. I agree with
Yeah.
you. No one. Yeah.
And I'm telling you, give me 6 months or a year, everyone will say the same thing about Stable. We've been pitching Stable for almost 2 years now, when this concept came together of the yield stripping and of how you could keep the yield and spend the stable coin. No one got it. It's a very complex way, because it is complicated to do the yield stripping and maintain the peg and all those things. No one got it. A lot of people still don't get it. They're like, what do you mean I can keep the interest and spend the money? Like, that doesn't even make sense. But I'll tell you, once it's out there, they're like, this is a no-brainer. Why would I ever use another stable coin when I don't get anything out of it? So, because you could go buy $10,000 of USDC and spend it, or you could buy $10,000 of a treasury, get the interest, and still spend it, but keep the interest. So once people really grasp that, they're just going to utilize this type of stable coin. However, I want to expand on that, because a lot of people aren't going to buy on-chain treasuries, right? It's more complicated than just if they just want to spend the money. However, now let's talk about the promise of Web3, which is the people who put the money in the network should reap the rewards. So now it's joining a movement. Do you want to join the movement of decentralization? Do you want to join a movement where the community makes all the money? Or do you want to continue to let centralized entities make all the money? It's just like electric vehicles. Sometimes they're usually more expensive, but a lot of people get electric cars because it's better for the environment. They're like, I'm proud to drive electric cars, it's better for the environment. People soon will say, I'm proud to use USST because the whole community makes the money. And if I want to, I can be part of that community. I just have to go through a couple extra steps, buy some treasuries and mint
Right.
it. But even if I don't want to do that, I know that tens of thousands of people are getting paid by putting the money into this system versus a centralized company. So we believe everyone will join that movement, because why not?
So when you say I can keep the interest while spending the money, how does that work? As in, I only get interest on the money that I haven't spent, right? The collateral that I'm still like holding.
So think about Tether. They keep the interest on the money you spend, right? You get that
Right.
$170 billion that they're sitting on, that these centralized companies are sitting on, is money that the community has given them. What does the community get out of it? They get the utility. They just get to use the token. It's great. So in the beginning, it was all that they could. And so it laid the foundation, stablecoin 1.0, but we've evolved. And so now, instead of that centralized company getting the yield, since all they did was buy a treasury with it and then give you the token, we're allowing you to buy the treasury. So since you bought the treasury and you locked it, we stripped the yield. So you keep the yield. So that treasury is still earning interest and you have the key to it.
Yeah.
And then you're spending the stablecoin. Now, if you want to unlock that treasury, since we gave you 2 tokens, you put both tokens back and then you get the collateral back.
Okay. So are you seeing like a lot of institutional demand for this in the early days, or are you seeing more retail demand? There is currently what sort of institutions, customers you're working with?
Yeah. So in the beginning, it is going to be institutions because they're sitting on either a lot of stable coins or they have these massive treasuries where they do want to have like treasuries and money market funds sitting in their big bank account. But it's just kind of an idle asset. Yes, it's earning that treasury return, but wouldn't it be great if it earned that treasury return and they had a stable coin that they could spend? It's so when they grasp that, they're like, you mean I can kind of double the amount I have in my treasury? I'll get all the yield, but then I'll get some utility out of that. It's not an idle asset anymore. So they're very excited. And so we've rolled this product out. We had an extremely successful TGE. We launched on
Yeah, I
Binance a
saw
week
that.
ago. And yeah, it's just the reception far exceeded our expectations. We're extremely excited about it because people are starting to get it like, this does make a lot of sense. Look how big the stablecoin category is. And if you're really creating something that's the evolution of it and can redefine how stablecoins work, really redefine how money is going to be made or minted and printed on chain, then we're all in. And so it's created quite a lot of excitement. And so
Yeah.
now our next stage, yeah.
So Avtar and your co-founder Avtar and I go back to enterprise blockchain days in London. I'm a big fan of Avtar and his extraordinary knowledge of modern capital markets, and so you guys are almost like a perfect combo.
Well, 100%. I couldn't be more proud to have him as a partner. He has his PhD in physics, and he's been deep in the blockchain for a decade. And he was
I
one of the
know.
first people to really dive into tokenization of RWAs. And so he just knows DeFi and tokenization so intimately that because what we're doing, while I say, oh, post collateral, we split it into 2 tokens and we issue the stablecoin, it's still extremely complex. So it's not algorithmic, right? We're fully collateralized, over collateralized by treasuries and money market funds. But then there's some super complex programming that enables the incentive mechanisms to ensure that it always holds the peg, et cetera, and the haircut mechanisms in the vaults. So there's really sophisticated technology behind this, and Avtar has really thought through all of that and wrote some very detailed papers on how it all
Yeah,
specifically works. Yeah. So
right.
yeah, we have made a really good team because I get to go share the vision of seeing the from the creation all the way to the evolution to what's happening in the future, and really get to talk about the future of what's happening in stablecoins and being able to create a company from scratch. And this is why we have 3 tokens. This is why the governance token
Yeah, tell
is
me more
so
about that.
important.
Right.
When you think about
Why
traditional
3
companies
tokens?
that yeah, well, there's the YLD NFT, super important. That's the yield that you get to keep. USST, the universal stable coin, and then stable STBL, our governance token. That we've created an ecosystem where as almost all of the profits generated go to the community. So think about again the centralized entities, they keep all the profits. Well, now most of our profits come from the yield, right? Well, 80% of the
Right.
yield instantly goes back to the minter. So that's a direct 1-to-1 correlation. You put the money in, you get 80% of it back. That 20% fee, that's the protocol fee that goes to cover overhead and grow the protocol. But the majority of that fee, especially as we scale, goes back into the stable token through buybacks and burns and various ways of rewarding the people that utilize that governance token. And so in that instance, that's 80% of the yield directly, and then the 20% that the protocol captures will go back into that stable token. So overall, almost 100% of the fees
Right.
above our overhead goes to the community. And that's why there's no equities in this company. It's all based on a token. And again, this is
That's
a
a good
pure
idea.
Web3
Right.
company.
I
Yeah,
think, yeah, there has been
we're
quite a bit
giving
of
the revenue to the people.
yeah, there is always
Sorry, yeah.
potential for conflict between equity holders and token holders. So you kind of aligning those incentives and all the Okay, so fine. I can essentially stake the governance token and earn some sort of fees or the revenues of the protocol. Is that how it works?
That's one way for sure, and that's Avatar came up with another brilliant concept called multi-factor staking. Since we have the governance token and USST, and there's a lot of formulas in there based on how long you stake it for and how much of the stable token you stake versus the USST token. So if you stake both tokens for a certain amount of time, etc., you get more rewards, and we get to adjust that to really encourage people to get stable our governance token and then go mint USST or buy it on the open market and stake it. So it really does create an amazing rewards loop or incentivization for people to participate into the network. And
Right, right.
especially in the beginning, because creating a stable coin is hard. It's hard to get adoption
Why is
and
it
use.
hard? Because it seems like everyone is doing it. I mean, I understand that there are, lending risks and prudential risks, and I think it worries stable coins. The proliferation of stable coins does worry regulators a bit because, you don't because ultimately it's about posting collateral and then issuing a dollar against it, and then the quality of the stable coin is really defined by the collateral and the chain of custody, right? As in, obviously, there is no credit risk in a bull market, but once things start to, prices start to drop, God forbid, I hope we have another few months left in the cycle, if not a year. Then credit risk starts to come through, and people start to behave differently, and you get Three Arrows and Celsius and Genesis and BlockFi and all of that. So there are quite a few genuine concerns around stable coins. But why else is it hard? I mean, the tech seems to be pretty
Yeah,
commoditized now.
yes. Let me refine my answer. Creating a stable
Right,
coin is easy. Getting
right,
people to use it is hard, right? Getting penetration is hard.
right, right.
Because you're right, everyone's creating a stable coin. And there's a lot of technologies coming out to make the creation of stable coins just out of the box. Push a button, here's your coin, right? And then it's up to you to figure out how it holds its peg, what it's backed by, what the regulatory regime is that you fall under. So, and a lot of people are doing it. A lot of banks are rolling it out. However, all of these stable coins, this proliferation of stable coins that you're seeing, they're basic. They're stablecoin 1.0. They don't give the end user any more benefit. You might as well use Tether or
Yeah,
Circle, etc., if you want to make the payment. And if you want to have a yield-bearing stable coin, which is just an on-chain treasury, why don't you just do some investments, right? It's so low. If you either want the stable coin so you're going to spend it, or you want to make an investment. So, anyways, that's where everyone's playing. But this is why we've solved a lot of those issues and we've made stable coins work for the people. It's gone from a centralized technology to a public utility to where everyone reaps the rewards from using it. And so if you want to interact with a stablecoin, meaning have a token for payment, and you want the yield from it, now you can utilize stable because you should get the yield and you should be able to keep it while that token's out in circulation. And the really innovative thing about stable, one of the many innovative things I should say about stable, again, is also why I call it a universal stablecoin. It's because it's the foundational layer for governments and large institutions and other people to mint their stablecoins on top of. And this is why we call them ecosystem specific stablecoins. So let's say you have a large ecosystem, a government or a large organization, where lots of money flows around in your ecosystem and you want your own branded stablecoin. So yes, there's easy tech to create your own branded stablecoin. But then what happens? It only works in your ecosystem because you're not going to get that stablecoin accepted everywhere. It's not going to be on other exchanges and other people aren't going to want it. So there's going to be friction getting in and out of the system. But when it's underpinned by a universal stablecoin, USST, meaning, I'll get to it in a minute, but meaning that you mint your white labeled stablecoin on top of it, you utilize it within the system, and anytime someone wants to take it out of the system, they just push a button and it turns into USST, and then USST is universally accepted.
I see.
But but even more importantly, for these large institutions that want to mint their own stablecoins, if they utilize any other platform or system, or let's say they partner with someone that shares the yield, those are all complex deals and they have to have accountants and lawyers and doing all these things. Our platform is a decentralized platform. It's out there that anyone can use, meaning this institution can come and say, oh, here's the list of RWAs I want to choose. I want BlackRock's Biddle Fund. and I want to
Mhm.
use that as collateral. So they buy a bunch of it. They mint their own. They mint their USST and stable. Then they utilize kind of the white label service, which allows them to program their own token on top of it. So they don't even, if they want, like in the future, once these tools are finally developed, they don't even need to talk to someone. Someone can mint their own stable coin right on top of it because everything's on chain. We'll know all of the collateral is locked in a vault and it's transparently done on chain. We'll know that their white labeled stablecoin is backed one-to-one by USST. So when all those pieces are in place, if they create a white labeled stablecoin and they have a community of people that want to use that, then all the trust is there because at any time it can go back to USST and be put in the wild, and it's all on chain and transparent. So it becomes really simple. And this is the future of white labeled stablecoins.
I see. So and that brings us to another question, right? So there is an extraordinary amount of competition now. The Tether is very dominant. Circle is huge. USDC is huge. So some people say that this game is over, and maybe Stripe or some major bank or payments company has a chance. But how do you kind of make your way through this highly competitive field where you already have some very large and dominant players and some very large payments companies coming in? How do you kind of position stable and drive adoption that way, and TVL, and mostly bringing users and institutions? How do you do that? What's your plan? What's your game plan?
It's a great question. You invent a new category.
Hmm.
You don't want to be stablecoin 1.0. You don't want to be a Me Too. You don't want to be one of the thousands of tokens that's competing for all
Definitely
that.
don't. Yeah.
You have to invent something that's at least 10 times better or no one will switch.
Hmm.
And I think we've invented something that's more than 10 times better on two fronts. One, just the universal stablecoin itself, USST, while its use case is identical to Tether and Circle and traditional payment coins, the reason that people will use it is because they know that either they're getting the yield because they minted it, or someone else in the community is getting the yield. And so people join a movement because all of the money flowing, all those billions of tens of billions of dollars of profits made by stablecoins goes to the community. So that's a significant improvement. Two, it's completely transparent and the reserves are always on chain because they are RWAs locked in vaults. These are treasuries locked in vaults.
Hmm.
And so that's just the underlying way that people want to use the universal stablecoin. And then kind of what I alluded to before about our white labeled version, these ecosystem specific stablecoins, the the software package, our platform for an entity that wants to mint its own stablecoin is just far superior than what anyone else is offering because that person that mints it gets the lion's share of the revenue and it's just out of the box, right? It's very simple to do. And then when they have their white labeled stablecoin, there's tools that's going to enable them to program that to do whatever they want specifically for their ecosystem. And so both the white labeled product and just the underlying platform is just orders of
I
magnitude
see.
better than stablecoin 1.0. That's how you
Okay.
compete. You
So
set your
now,
own category.
so you're not US based, right? So stable, because I think even under the Genius Act, there is still quite a bit of debate about yield bearing stablecoins, and you are
We are
building a
not
yield bearing.
a we're not a yield bearing
Okay.
stablecoin. We are Genius Act compliant because Genius Act wants you to back it by treasuries. We're backed with
Mhm.
treasuries and money
Mhm.
market funds. And we're not a yield bearing stablecoin. So that's another novel thing about our platform that we've solved for, which is yield bearing stablecoins. There's two issues. One, it's a security, so it just creates friction. And two, you lose the yield the moment you spend it. So it's not
Right.
really a stable, it's an investment. It's not money because it's like, all right, well, I spent it, it's gone. And so
Mhm.
since we strip them, one is a security and the other's not. And you keep the yield
Ah,
and you spend the stable coin.
very interesting. Very interesting. And so, but that is still. I mean, I don't want to get too technical, but that still makes one of these assets kind of the core stablecoin compliant. But then there is this other interest rate, the yield strip, which how do you kind of navigate that?
Yeah, so it is from traditional finance yield stripping, and that's what our
Right.
protocol does. It strips the yield and
Yeah.
that income streams accrued in that yield-based NFT, and then so that it's an NFT, And so it has a duration, an interest rate, and the dollar amount that's attached to it. And then there's a secondary market for that as well, right? So that'll be a whitelisted secondary kind of peer-to-peer market. So it's kind of similar to what Pendle does on that piece. Like Pendle just tokenizes yield and allows you to trade it. So you'll be able to also trade the yield NFT as well, as well as spend the stablecoin.
Got it. Okay, that's very, very cool. So I mean, I'm gonna look into a lot of detail, look into this in a lot of detail, because this sounds really fascinating. And I think it's kind of from an RWA, creating a general purpose stablecoin based on a much wider set of collateral. And also, I think creating a very interesting, secured. I looked at the list of collateral that's currently acceptable, and it looks pretty high quality and secure. But I think gradually you can kind of expand that, and based on some sort of credit risk assessment. And okay, this is very, very cool. So where do you go from here? I know we are coming to the top of the hour, and you've been. I hope I can bring you on again to discuss some of these things in more detail. And but where do you go from here? What's the plan ahead?
Yeah, and the other piece I want to add around the protocol and why I'm so enthusiastic about it is we're not competitive. We are collaborative with most all these new protocols in the industry, because most of the protocols are either a yield-bearing stablecoin or these tokenization platforms bringing the high-quality RWAs on chain. They're so excited to partner with us because right now they have these clients that are buying tens of millions of dollars of their product, of these tokenized assets, but then what do they do with them? So now they're like, oh, you mean that we can integrate with you and I can sell it to my client and also tell my client, oh, push this button. And all of a sudden that token turns into two and they get a stable coin as well. Right. So they're excited. So we're working on those partnerships so they can really just help us
I see.
spread the word of the
So now you
protocol.
have an asset that can be potentially used for payments, or like entity settlements, and then you have this yield stripping feature, which kind of gives us access to yield, and I think also solves a bunch of interesting problems. So very interesting. I mean, it sounds like something you and Avtar could pull off. I think that it kind of takes both
Yeah.
the sets of talents and expertise. It's really fascinating. So any other thoughts and the messages you want to leave our audience with?
Yeah, I mean, it's very exciting times, right? Especially being in the
For
space for
sure.
so long and seeing the
Yeah.
evolution. And now we're really hitting the ground running because, again, the regulatory shift. And more importantly, like the technology is, people used to be so excited about all the protocol layers, but it was super complicated, but they were making money, so they wanted to learn about it. And we're finally getting to the applications. And everyone says, when's that interface moment? When's it going to be easy enough to use all of these DeFi things and these wallets? And the reason why it's so complicated is because the internet was easy, right? It was just the movement of information and wasn't high value really. But now this is the movement of money. And not only is it the movement of money, but you are responsible for your money on chain, right? It's either it's either non-custodial wallet or custodial wallet. And so all those UI and UXs are complicated. And so
Yeah.
we're getting to a point where AI is really going to start easier. And what that's going to get
Yeah.
us to is really where people are focused on the applications. And that's
Yeah.
when it really gets exciting, because when you focus on the
Phenomenal.
applications and they're easy enough for people to use, that's when the whole world gets involved and the borders disappear, because then it's super easy to do all sorts of global business where the currencies don't
Yeah.
matter because it'll change on the fly, it will move around on the fly. And so once you can navigate the regulatory landscape of that, the whole world gets to be plugged into world-class financial services with world-class currencies. And that will really materially change the world.
Amazing. It's been a real pleasure, Reeve. I think, first of all, I can't thank you enough for pushing us forward, right? At a time when I guess, people like me and would have been worried about everything, right? BSA, oh, these are the rules. How the fuck do we, work in this framework? And then I think you guys went internet first and brought us this far. And I think my own thinking has evolved quite a lot over the years. I think as I have worked with work with the innovators, the founders, the people who they push us forward against the deficiencies of the current system, take the risks that need to be taken, innovate, are willing to try new things and push us forward, envision new things. So yeah, I'm very grateful, and I think, and also thank you for bringing some new ideas to me and to us today around the yield stripping innovation around governance, multi-factor staking. There's a lot to learn, and also I think some of the core ideas and value proposition for traditional finance and institutional markets. So I feel quite much better educated after this conversation. So I really would love to see you again, hopefully in person at some point, and and hopefully on our show as well. So thank you so much. It's an honor.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you very much.